Hello, this is Devon Redmond with the Audacity to Emote web series, and we're back for another episode. And we have an amazing guest for you today. His name is Scotty Arnold. He is a longtime friend of the theater and dance department here at Wayne. He's worked with us before in a few capacities, I believe. I'm gonna let you talk about yourself for a minute and who you are. Who is Scotty Arnold?
I am in therapy trying to figure that out. Um, but, what I know right now is I just turned 35, which was very exciting for musical theater fans out there. There's a musical called Company that is all about a guy, like a single guy turning 35 and having a breakdown. So I've been listening to that a lot.
Mhm, mhm.
Um, and I am from Palo Alto, California, from the Bay Area. Born and raised there, went to college out there, grew up a theater kid, always know that I wanted to do this. And so came to New York for graduate school for musical theater writing. And that I guess gets to maybe the more relevant answer of who I am. So I've been writing musicals for about 10 years, and along the way doing that, started writing music for the Notre Dame Shakespeare Festival, where I met Cheryl Tursky, who brought me to Wayne State University. And
Mm,
I think that sort of catches us up, and I'm happy to go into any of that in detail.
the Fighting Irish.
Yeah.
That's what's up. That's cool. So yeah, that's really interesting. I think that you're from Palo Alto. I would think that you would have been drawn to film. What specifically um drew you into the theater world? I imagine that had to have been a very conscious decision.
um, that's a funny question. It when I was the Palo Alto that people have heard about now wasn't totally born yet when I was growing up.
Mm,
And so I think at the time that I was sort of in elementary school and middle school and sort of like forming who I was and what my options were, I think Palo Alto was more of a cute little city than sort of the pulsing heart of Silicon Valley. Um, and so I didn't feel like growing up like I had like the connection or possibility, like it didn't seem like an obvious choice to uh to work in film. But
I gotcha.
I think the thing that happened was my mom's parents, my grandparents on my mom's side, grew up loving musicals. And they lived in LA, and so I visited them, and they had an amazing record collection that I sort of fell in love with. And they sort of passed that love of theater and sort of
Mm.
musicals in particular along to my mom. And so I grew up watching The Sound of Music and My Fair Lady, and all these sort of classic musicals, and fell in love with it that way. And then there was this really amazing children's theater in my hometown called the Palo Children's Theater. They're still around, and I started I started doing theater there when I was 8, and I totally fell in love with it. It's where I felt like I belonged. It's where I found my friends, and I think that was sort of the thing that cemented it more than anything, was the Palo Children's Theater.
Oh, okay. It's so funny. I feel like that's a through point with most of the people that I've interviewed who get into the arts. Their parents are usually involved in the arts too, and
Uh,
that's like my past is a in music. It's been the same way more often than not, especially people who are pretty successful at it or go on and they do it for a living. I think there's something that you have to come to grips with of art being a reality as a career. I think there's a leap between the hobbyist and the person who's like, no, I'm going to do this for a living, you know.
totally.
And so that's cool. I feel like that's you have that courage to plow through, just like
Well,
all of us artists.
sure. Yeah, we try, right?
Mhm.
And I should say, speaking to that, idea that I have my mom and my dad are met in day jobs at IBM, but both of them are writers, and so
Ah,
certain
mhm.
lineage to that, and sort of like you said, it was easy for me to imagine that for myself because they by the time I was sort of in middle school, high school, they both stopped their day jobs and were sort of full time writing. And so my mom is a novelist, and my
What
dad.
Oh, yeah, go ahead, I'm sorry. You were
Oh, sorry.
answering a question.
Mom's a novelist, dad's a poet,
Ah,
and
wow,
as well. So
and you're a musical writer. That's really cool, a family of writers.
my sister's a doctor. She's the black sheep.
That's a turn, usually the doctors are not the black sheeps, but that is cool. That is cool. Um, so tell me about Tish.
Sure.
The reason is like in my from my understanding, and understand that my exposure to theater really came when I got to Wayne State. I mean, I had seen theater in college and in high school. I was in like a music. I was in like Fame the musical as like the music teacher, but it was a really small role.
Is it fun?
So my exposure was very slim. But now that I've been into the theater world for a number of years, I've met people from all over the place. And Tish is a particularly prestigious place for theater. I feel like it's always treated with a certain level of respect, I guess, because it's right in New York and the right. But but tell me about your experience there and what you learned.
I had a great time. I sort of figured out in high school that I wanted to write musicals and that that's what I wanted to do. And so even back then was sort of like looking at pathways to that. And Tish, uh, so like Tish is the performing arts section of NYU, and Tish had what was then and continues to be the only graduate program for musical theater writing in the country.
Oh, I
Uh,
did not know that.
maybe in the
Okay.
world, but definitely in the country. Yeah, they're sort of the only ones with a graduate degree in musical theater writing. So,
Wow.
so once I sort of decided that I wanted to do that, um, and sort of was lucky enough to have a pathway toward continuing education, like a master's degree, that felt like the sort of obvious step. So
Mhm.
I finished undergrad. I did my undergrad at a small Jesuit school in California, where I'm from, called
Santa
Santa Clara
Clara?
University.
Mhm.
And it was great. And I was a double major there in music and theater, and sort of knew where I wanted to go. Took a year off, and then came to Tish. And what it was a 2-year grad program, and one of the most there were a few magical things about it. One of the magical things was sort of finding my New York tribe right when I moved there. I think it's when you move to a new city, and it's always sort of
Mhm.
you have to have an action plan to like find your people there.
Yeah, your tribe.
And you're right, exactly. And I moved there, on a Sunday, and I started school on Monday. Moved with my best friend from California, so I already had that going on, and then met these wonderful weirdos who were weird like me.
I literally cannot think of a more intimidating place to try to find your tribe or friends.
The New York City, right? Exactly.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, so I was really lucky to sort of have an amazing group of people who continue to be some of my closest friends. Uh, and the gift of having 2 years there, amazing teachers, amazing knowledge, but sort of the number one thing that I think I didn't understand when I went into grad school, but the number one gift of grad school is getting 2 years to completely focus on whatever that is,
Yes.
right? Because I graduated, and then like, yes, I'm still a musical theater writer and I'm still doing that, but like it transitions very quickly to being sort of like a nights and weekends thing, right? Like you have to
Right,
pay
because you have to
rent,
make a living,
and so you
yeah.
have to have the day job. And so having 2 years where my only job was to write, and was to like write with these other people and learn with them and grow with them,
Wow.
that was a transformative 2 years.
So, I wanna backtrack a little bit, and go back to high school because, I was thinking, so you knew that you wanted to be a musical theater writer in high school.
I said that, didn't I? Yeah. Yeah, I think, uh, yeah, one of the things, like, I said I sort of, like, grew up on classic musicals, and then I, like, got to when Rent came out, or I found Rent when I was in middle school. It had come out, like, a year or 2 before. And in middle school, like, I went to sort of like a hippie elementary school, which was great. We had, like, a farm on our school, and we called our teachers by their first names, and we didn't get grades, and it was
Oh
like
wow. Okay.
um, and then transitioned to a very normal middle school. And, like, I remember that first day was just, like, shocking, of like, oh, I guess I have to, like, try to fit in now. I guess I have to, like, the school that I went to just, like, really didn't sort of have cliques. And so, like, suddenly, in this sort of, like, prototypical, you look
Yeah.
at that scene in all the movies of, like, the different tables and who people are. And so I was
And that
like,
was still in Palo Alto. This is all in Palo
that was
Alto.
still in Palo Alto, yeah, Jordan Middle School. And I had like, my first couple of days there. I think I was like, oh, I guess I have to figure out what cool is and do that. And like, loving, like, Oklahoma doesn't really fit into that. And so I remember, like, going to Borders and, like, being like, okay, I think to be cool, I have to buy the Backstreet Boys and Hanson. Like, I'm dating myself very specifically right now.
It's all
And
right.
the Spice Girls, and I, like, bought those 3Ds,
Look,
3
I'm 34.
okay, I can fit
I'm
in
right
now.
there with you.
And that was, like, so, like, I had, like, a very strange 6th grade of, like, trying to be somebody who listens to those albums. And then, at the end of 6th grade, I found Rent, and it was like, "Oh, I thought I was trying to be too cool for musicals, but, like, I have found this thing, and actually musicals are way too cool for me still, so I can, like, still run the."
You can start.
Um, and so Rent was an amazing influence on me there. And then continuing sort of into high school, like, um, uh, encountering a contemporary version of this thing you love. It's like, oh, this is still being made. This can actually not speak to somebody 100 years ago, but can speak to me right now. Is actively teaching me things about the world that I didn't know yet, which, you can argue those other musicals did, but this was sort of, like, visceral and
Yeah.
current and now, at the time. And so, sort of putting that together in high school was a big deal. And then I remember I took a humanities class in high school, and the final project I thought was really cool. The final project is, like, do something you've never done before. That's the final. um, and so at the time, I was like, uh, my theater program was about to host this, like, one act play festival. And I was
Mhm.
like, I feel like I want to write musicals, and so I'm gonna, like, write a short musical and, like, put it into the festival, right? Um, and so it was like a great assignment, and sort of, like, steered the course of my life, I guess, a little bit, because I wrote a little, 10-minute thing that got into our little high school festival. And that was sort of the start of,
Wow.
like, yeah, I can do this.
Wow. So that school project um, opened the door for you. I mean, well, I get the feeling you probably wouldn't have wound up in the same in the same field anyway, but it was the first foray. What's the word? Foyer? Foray?
Yeah,
Foray
hooray. Yeah,
into
foyer. I
foray.
went into the entryway of musical
Yes. I was like, that's not right. That's not right at all.
foray. Yeah, yeah.
Into playwriting and musical writing. That's really cool. So okay. Well, here's a question. What's your favorite musical? And I want to start because I know you have a connection to my favorite musical of all time, which is Fun Home. And look, so for me, Fun Home, I saw it at the Fisher. Um, the music isn't my it's not my favorite music, but it's the entirety of everything. And it's pretty close. I mean, the music's cool. You know what I'm saying? But it's like the experience was like, whoa, I don't, it just touched me in a really deep place. It was very, very moving. And I had never been moved like that from a musical before.
I'm
So
so glad to hear that.
yeah. Yeah.
Uh, I love Fun Home. Um, I mentioned Rent, and Rent was, like, continues to be sort of, like, toward the top for me, and continues to be an influence on me. and has sort of like shaped my life more than anything else. But I remember the first time. This will be like a pretentious answer, but there's this musical called Caroline or Change that is by Tony Kushner, who wrote Angels in America,
Yeah, yeah, no
and Janine Tesori, who's a composer who wrote the music to Fun Home.
Oh,
Um,
didn't
uh,
know that.
yeah, so it's a collaboration between the two of them. It's sort of semi-autobiographical on his part. It's about a young Jewish boy growing up in Louisiana in 1963, and it's a Jewish family with a black maid, and it's a very small story about that family and that relationship, and
Mhm.
it's also like a very big story about 1963 and the relationship of African Americans and Jewish people, and um, Kennedy dying and MLK, and sort of
Living
all
that,
these
yeah,
things been around in
that
it.
time. Yeah.
Um, and I was lucky enough to see that on Broadway when it came in 2003, I think, and uh, maybe five, getting old, and
That was
it really
15
sort
years
of,
ago now.
um, but I loved it, and it sort of again sort of shifted what musical theater could be, and for me, and I was already in love with Janine Tesori's music, and I was like more fully in love with it after that. Before that, she wrote a musical, Thoroughly Modern Millie, and she wrote a lovely musical called Violet. So I was already a fan of hers,
Oh,
and
I've heard of that. I've heard of Violet.
what
I've heard of Violet. I
I
haven't.
think it's really cool. And so when I was in grad school, uh, Carolina Change was my favorite musical, and I had a friend. There's this amazing woman in New York City named Jennifer Tepper, and she's sort of like a professional fan and also like an amazing curator and also an amazing producer, and but has always been sort of like a great connector of people. And so I was fortunate enough to know her, and there was a moment where she like emailed me and said, "Hey, I know that you have done some music assisting and music copy work, which is like being in the room, being sort of a music assistant and being in the room when a musical is being written and workshopped."
Mm,
To keep the score up to date, so you're like on your computer, sort of like tracking changes and doing things like that to make sure that the musical score is current. And I had done some of that. And so she said, I know you've done this. And Janine Tesori is looking for somebody to do this for a week for her for this new thing that she's working on called Fun Home. Um, and I was like, yes, 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 yes. And I like, the like, dean of my program and said, I need to take a week off of grad school.
wow,
And
that's awesome.
luckily they sort of like understood what this was enough to say yes. And that was the first reading of Fun Home.
Crazy.
And it was a week, and I remember the music was all in Janine's head at that point. She hadn't written anything down, and so it was an
Do
amazing
you
group of.
remember the first song that she? I'm so curious. Which song she came up with first? Was it
At
the
that point,
airplane
there were
song?
a few songs. There were a few songs. I think most of the songs from that point ended up in the show, and um, the
Or the first one that you heard?
the first one I heard was a version of the opening into He Wants, which is still in the
Yes.
show. The opening changed a little bit, but is sort of the same in essence,
Okay.
and then He Wants is pretty identical to that first draft in that
Wow.
first reading, which is pretty
Okay.
cool.
Okay.
Uh,
I know we've
and
went.
so these amazing actors were looking at lyric sheets and sort of like had their iPhones out recording voice memos, and she would just sort of sing this on the piano and they would learn it by ear, which is a very different experience than
Oh yeah.
a lot of musicals, right? Like if you're in a
Mm,
musical, you're usually like sitting there with the sheet music and
sight reading,
people
yeah.
are plunking things out, and this was very Janine has a um, I think a really lovely idea that writing things down too early in the process sort of like uh,
Cement it in a way.
yeah, exactly. And
Mhm.
that if you don't write it down and you sort of teach it orally and you let it hang out in the world, and you hear something that an actor does that is slightly different than what you did, or you play it another time and you do it slightly differently, you're sort of still discovering the
Yeah.
material at that point. So So it was an intentional thing, but like, but also I was sort of brought in to like try to write down once once she was ready to commit to something, I would sort of write it down. And there was no like, I remember Lisa Crone brought in the script on the final day of the reading. I think she was home working furiously trying to sort of like get this to a point where we could hear the whole thing out loud. And there really wasn't a director on that. It was Janine teaching the actors these songs, and I think we had all read the graphic novel at the point. I remember I sort of like got that email from Jennifer Tepper and like went out and found the graphic novel and devoured it, and it's so great and so in so many amazing ways. And if it's one of those projects, I think, where like if you didn't know if you hadn't heard the musical, you'd be like, how on earth are you going to do this? How on earth are you going to put this book on stage? And I think being in that room watching them figure it out was such an amazing process for me.
That is awesome. That is awesome. I want to go back again because I did have a question. And so when you entered Santa Clara,
Mhm.
um, you're you were a voice major, I assume, or
I
no?
was the one of the I think great things about Santa Clara is that they have both the theater department and the music department are sort of small enough that you get your BA in music and or in theater, and you can have focuses, but you sort of get a well-rounded education in that thing.
Oh,
So
okay, okay,
I went in a little bit of a voice major, but I sort of knew that I was going to end up composition, and if I had a focus by the end, it was composition.
gotcha. When I went to, because I have my music degree as well. When I
Oh,
went to,
cool.
yeah, from Grand Valley State, which is like on the west side of Michigan. If you're are you familiar with it at all?
A little bit, yeah, yeah. That's
They
awesome. How'd you like it?
Oh, I loved it. I'm a huge Grand Valley fan. I'm a huge Wayne State fan too.
Ah.
But they made us they forced you into a primary instrument, and
Okay.
you couldn't take composition until your junior year,
Okay.
which is don't know if that was the right move, but that was how they did it at the time, or at least that's what I think. Maybe it was sophomore year. Um, it was something like that.
Sure.
Um, but so that's interesting. So you really knew that you wanted to take this route. Did you ever have any doubt that you like, or second thoughts like maybe I should be study economics or something? I don't
um, no. um,
know.
I didn't have, I mean, I would have like, what I feel like I feel like musical theater writing is like the weird career. And so like, maybe you have like alternative ideas about like, I should go into econ. I should like go over to there to the amazing business school that Santa Clara has and like maybe make some money at some point in my life. But I was the opposite. I was like, I'm doing musical theater, and like when I have to dream of like a way when I'm, when it's 2 a.m. and I'm writing a paper and I'm done with this, what do I dream about? I dream about like joining the circus. I dream about like running
Mhm.
away with some with some crazy performers or something. But I've never I'm proud or ashamed or something to say that I've never thought about studying economics.
No, that's all. Listen, the reason I asked, one of the reasons I asked is that I know that a lot of the students and alumni that watch this will be juggling that very idea and thought because it's very common, and I feel like you got to go where your heart is. I don't want to give reckless career advice.
And I will say that I'm still very much juggling that, and I have a really great day job right now at the Hudson Valley Shakespeare Festival, which is near here, and I'm doing admin for them, which is love. It's adjacent to what I want to be doing. It's in theater,
Mhm.
and particularly right now in the middle of a pandemic, I'm really thankful to have that job. Um, so it never that I would be making more money right now if I were an econ major.
Maybe.
Maybe, sure, right. Um,
Probably, but
but
you'd
but
also be an econ major.
I also,
Whenever I think about that, like I sometimes think like, man, I could have been a doctor. Right, but then I was like, but then I would have to be a doctor.
Right, right. There's
There's that part.
right. Yeah.
Um, so if there was one piece of advice that you could give the aspiring creative, whether they be a actor, actress, musician, or writer, what would it be about life or pursuing their dreams? And
What a great question. Uh, it took me a little while to commit to the idea that if you want to grow, you have to change. Um, and so, I think I spent some years sort of holding on to the image that I dreamt about when I was 15, 16, 17 for how I wanted my life to look.
mm,
And I think it was sort of in my like mid 20s that I was like, oh, I don't have to I can still be me and not hold on to that. And I can, and in fact, if I want to grow as a person, then I have to let go of that a little bit. And so
absolutely.
there was, so I think, you know, making sure to ask what's making you happy and what you want for your life right now, as opposed to what you wanted from your life 5 years ago.
And that it's okay that it changes, like you said,
It's even good, right?
yes, and
If it,
necessary.
right. If that's not changing, then maybe you're a little stuck.
Yeah, yeah. Wow, that's a simple but powerful thought, an idea. So tell me what you're doing with Wayne State right now.
Um, I'm doing, I'm actually doing these two cool projects. I don't know. We talked about one of them, but there's a second one too.
With Travoy Go, right?
Travoya Gold. You even know how to say Travoya. I'm very impressed. Yes. Okay. So I'll talk about that one quickly, and then I'll talk about the other thing. Travoya Gold is Travoya is a made up word. So don't worry,
Oh,
you're not no one listening is dumb for not knowing it. Travoya is a made up island that we made up that's off the coast of Norway, and it is so cold there that corpses under the ground don't decompose, which is a health hazard. And so it's illegal to die in Travoya. But the citizens of Travoya want the right to die in their homeland, and so they petition the Norwegian government to gain their independence so that they can have the right to die there. And Norway says you can have your independence as long as you prove your cultural significance by winning a gold medal in curling in this year's Olympics.
wow. Okay, I like
I
this. I
should
like.
say also that this is a musical that I wrote with my friend
Mm,
and collaborator Alana Jacoby, and it is a musical that the amazing talented people of Wayne State undergraduate are rehearsing right now and going to perform this winter.
wow, wow! I can't wait to hear it. I can't wait to hear it, man. That sounds so interesting. That was not what I thought. They said it was about some Norwegian curling team. I think someone told me that, and I was like, okay, all right.
Yeah, yeah.
But that's
It's like
much more
there's
interesting.
definitely like one part Mighty Ducks in there, but there's also like one part like weird political satire.
Gotcha. I love it. I love it. I can't wait to see it.
Thank you.
And then tell us about the Shakespeare Project here.
The Shakespeare Project. So I mentioned the way that I sort of originally found myself to Wayne State is through the amazing Cheryl Trisky, which I hope everyone knows, and if they don't, look her up. She is teaches acting and movement at Wayne State, and is the I worked with her for 3 summers. She did movement, and I did music at the Notre Dame Shakespeare Festival. And we immediately hit it off. Within 2 weeks, people were like calling us the Weasley twins. Um, uh, we just had an immediate connection, and one of the and we both loved working on these Shakespeare shows. Uh, and so after a few years of that, I had accumulated enough sort of like music and songs that I've written for these Shakespeare plays that I've worked on, that I felt proud of and wanted to sort of like find um, a vehicle to share those with the world, and sort of like yeah, a way to carry those on. Um, and then I found this funny old book called Tales from Shakespeare, and it's by Charles and Mary Lamb, who are this brother and sister, who Cheryl likes to point out from the introduction, like they were actually really weird, and like Mary, the sister, like killed their mother in like a fit of rage. So like there's like a weird backstory there, but
Yeah.
and like, you know, her name wasn't originally on the book because she was a woman. It was like a lot of, anyway.
A lot of drama. Yeah, details.
But the book is these sort of nighttime story, like bedtime story, fairy tale versions, little short stories of Shakespeare's plays, of a bunch of Shakespeare's plays. So it's like, you know, like a 10-page prose version of like, this is what happens in a Midsummer Night's Dream. And it's written beautifully and fairly accurate to the plays. And so when I found this, I was like, okay, this I thought, wouldn't it be cool to put like an evening together of a couple of these shows that we've worked on in a sort of truncated, like in an abridged way, not hopefully not truncated, but abridged, where we get in a half hour, we get the full story of Twelfth Night, and we do that through three things: through sort of some narration from straight out of this book, Tales from Shakespeare, and some of Shakespeare's amazing dialogue straight from the source. And then I throw in sort of this music and some of these songs that I've written for these pieces. So
Let me tell you.
so that was the dream that I had about how to move this forward. And then when Cheryl called at the start of the pandemic and was like, we're trying to, you know, it's time to get creative about programming. Cheryl and I both were very excited about the idea of giving this over to Wayne State and collaborating on the development of this piece.
That sounds so dope because I have the version of 12th Night that we did was almost 4 hours long. It was a long one. It was a long
Okay.
one.
This is going to be a shorter one. Yeah.
I don't know how much I'm exaggerating, but it was definitely 3 hours. It was like 3 hours plus.
Yeah. It's a long play. It's a long play. So we, you know, the fun of it, the fun and challenge of it has been sort of like how to pare it down without sort of sacrificing the
like you said, truncating.
Yeah, right, exactly. Without sort of like, you know, there's a certain like investment and catharsis you want for like watching those things, right? And sort of what's the not the minimum, but you know, what's a comfortable length where you can still sort of invest in these characters and fully commit to this story while maybe not being 4 hours long.
Yeah. Which yes. Oh, that's really cool, man. That's
Thank
really
you.
cool.
Thank you. Yeah, so we're in the middle of 12th night rehearsals right now, and after that, we're going to put together The Tempest, and I think we're going to pair those two shows together as sort of the we're referring to them as the shipwreck plays. They both sort of start with these big shipwrecks that that separate these characters that we will grow to know and love.
Wow. And I know I'm not asking for any specifics, but when will that be ready? Do you know?
That's a great question. I think it's a question that we're very much asking right now, but we are hoping and expecting to have something to
In the
present
winter.
in the winter. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Like the winter semester.
Winter. We don't, it's, you know, things are, when we dreamt up this project in April, it was like, okay, well, maybe in the fall we'll be able to have something small in person, and like obviously that has changed, right? So I don't know if it's school wide, but I know the theater department particularly is like that's off limits.
Yeah,
and rightfully so. And so we've been actively one of the really fun parts of the process has been to sort of actively think about how if this continues to be our reality, how we can present this material in the best way over Zoom or through video. And we've been the students, this grad class, you guys get excited for it. They're great, and they're imaginative, and the things they have been figuring out. A lot of what we've been doing in rehearsals is sort of, or how we started rehearsals is just to sort of give them explorations, say like, okay, this is the part of the play that I want you to figure out. And I want you to figure out how to like how to do that compellingly on a video camera. And so, like we're playing with it, at that point we were playing with voiceover, we were playing with sort of like quick cuts and what you can, and we like veered into some like TikTok video ideas. But like, how can you, how
Yeah.
can you express this in a way that hopefully is not saying, oh gosh, I miss theater, but is saying like, oh, look at that cool thing that they made, right?
This
That
cool
doesn't feel like
new
a
unique
substitute for
thing.
something, but is like its own.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So hopefully
It's
the winner.
exciting territory to be in. I mean, it's also scary because no one's like a pro at it yet.
Sure.
We're all trying to figure out the techniques of like, how does this work exactly? What can you do with staging? And Zoom isn't the best uh uh tool for that, but the one doesn't exist yet. So I feel like people are
Yeah.
they're using what they got to make it happen. And
Totally. Totally. And
and
and and the also the fact that nobody's a pro at it is sort of exciting, right? Because
right,
like
exactly.
then we're fully in the sandbox together. Then it's like there is no right way to do this.
We're
What's our
making the right way. You know what?
right.
We're pioneers. Yes. So that is really exciting. This is a new time. Um, yeah, I could go down. I got many other things I wanted to talk about in that same vein because I just got a Oculus Quest, and I feel like it has opened my eyes to what the possibilities could be with
Sure.
VR. Um, and they're already way cheaper than they used to be. But I'm not going to go there. It's
We'll
been a
talk about
cool
that later
thing.
because I'm interested.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. Me and you offline. Scotty, it's been great talking to you. I'm really looking forward to see those projects in the winter. Um, well, is Travoya, that's also going to be in the winter, right?
They're both going to be in the winter. We're sort of
Okay.
going through a similar process with both of them of sort of figuring out how to present them in the best way, but they'll both be in the winter.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. I can't wait. It was great to learn more about you and listen to your journey as an artist. You are a spectacular dude.
Thank
Congrats,
you,
man.
Devon. You have great questions. Thanks so much for talking with me.
You're very welcome. You're very welcome. And to all the audience folks out there, we will see you next time on the Audacity to Emote.